The sound of soft music filled the grand wedding hall. Golden lights shined over hundreds of guests, flowers decorated every corner, and everyone's eyes were on the handsome millionaire, Arman Khan, and his new bride, Sarah. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale marriage. A rich man, a beautiful woman, a perfect night. But something was missing. Arman stood beside his bride like a statue. His face showed no smile, no warmth. When the priest said, "You may now kiss the bride," he simply nodded and turned away. The crowd clapped, but everyone whispered behind their hands. Why didn't he even look at her? Is it an arranged marriage? No one knew the truth. Not even Sarah. That night, Sarah entered her new home, a huge mansion with tall glass windows and silent halls. Servants bowed to her politely, but the air felt cold. Arman showed her the guest room and said calmly, "You can rest here. I have some work." But then he walked away. Sarah waited for him to return. Hours passed. Midnight came. The house was quiet. That was the first night of their marriage. And it ended in silence. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Arman and Sarah lived under the same roof, but their lives were like two separate worlds. He had his office downstairs and his study upstairs. She had her meals alone. Every morning, she tried to greet him. "Good morning," she said with a gentle smile. He nodded slightly and left for work. Every night she waited for him at dinner, but he always said the same thing, "I've already eaten." It had been 2 years since their wedding. 2 years without touch, without love. He never shouted at her. He never hurt her, but he never held her hand either. Sometimes Sarah stood near the window, watching the rain hit the glass, whispering to herself, "What is wrong with me? Why does he hate me?" But deep down, she knew hate wasn't the problem. Something else was. Something she couldn't understand. The mansion itself felt haunted by memories. Every wall had a photo of Arman's achievements, his business empire, his charity awards. But not one picture of their wedding, not even a single photo of Sarah. There was one locked room at the end of the upstairs hallway. The servant said softly, "Madam, sir doesn't allow anyone there." Sarah once touched the doorknob. It was cold, like ice out at night. She sometimes heard footsteps near that door. But when she looked, no one was there. Her friend Rena visited one afternoon. "You're lucky, Sarah. Every girl dreams of marrying a millionaire." Sarah smiled weakly. Yes, lucky. But when Rena left, she sat alone and cried quietly. Arman was kind to everyone else. To his workers, to poor people, even to strangers. He donated millions to hospitals. But to his wife, he gave nothing. Not love, not care, not even words. Once, Sarah tried to start a real conversation. "Arman, don't you think we should know each other better?" He looked at her for a second, his eyes full of something dark, maybe pain, maybe fear, and simply said, "There are things you don't understand." Then he left. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The sound of thunder echoed outside and she thought about packing her bags. But something held her back. Maybe hope. Hope that one day he would look at her not as a stranger, but as his wife. The next morning, she found Arman sitting alone on the balcony, staring at the sunrise. His hands were shaking slightly. When he noticed her, he stood up quickly and walked away. Something was clearly haunting him, a secret locked deep inside, and for the first time, Sarah realized her marriage was not just cold, it was hiding something. Something buried in Arman's past. Something that could destroy both of them. The camera zooms out from the mansion's window, showing Arman standing alone in his dark study, holding a small photo in his hand. A single tear drops onto the picture before the screen fades to black. Voiceover. 2 years of marriage without a single touch. But one night would change everything. Asterisk morning light touched the curtains, but Sarah was already awake. She had not slept well again. The same silence filled the room, the same emptiness that had lived there for 2 years. Every day began the same way, Arman's footsteps in the hallway, his quiet breakfast, and then the sound of the car leaving the mansion gate. She tried to smile when he passed by. "Good morning," she said softly. He only nodded, his face calm and unreadable. The door closed behind him, and the house turned still again. Sarah sat at the dining table, her cup of tea turning cold. She looked at the seat across from her, always empty. Sometimes she whispered to herself, "Does he even remember I exist?" She tried to keep herself busy. She painted, read books, helped servants, even planted flowers in the garden. But no matter what she did, she could not fill the empty space in her heart. Armand never shouted or argued. He was gentle, polite, but distant, like a stranger who shared her address but not her life. One evening, the rain began to fall. Sarah stood near the window watching the drops hit the glass. She saw Armand outside, talking on the phone in the rain. He wasn't angry, but his voice carried sadness. When he came in, Sarah quickly offered him a towel. "You'll catch a cold," she said. He took it, thanked her quietly, and walked past. She stood there holding the towel in her hand, feeling invisible. Later that night, she walked past his study. The door was slightly open. Armand sat alone, staring at something on his desk, maybe a photo. His eyes looked wet, but before she could step closer, he turned off the light. Sarah walked away, her heart heavy with questions. Days went by. Rumors started to spread among the servants. "Sir doesn't let anyone clean the last room upstairs," one whispered. "I heard he goes there every week," said another. Sarah's curiosity grew stronger. One afternoon, when Armand was at work, she slowly climbed the stairs toward that locked door. It looked old, untouched, but clean. She turned the knob locked. She tried to peek through the keyhole, but it was covered. She felt a strange energy there, like the room was holding a memory that refused to die. When she turned to leave, she noticed something lying on the floor beside the door, a small, dried white flower. She picked it up carefully and whispered, "What are you hiding, Armand?" Her friend Rena visited again after many months. "You look pale," Rena said, sitting beside her. "You need a vacation, Sarah. Maybe he'll miss you if you go." Sarah smiled weakly. "Maybe he won't even notice I'm gone." Rena frowned. "Why do you stay?" Sarah looked out the window, thinking, because maybe love takes time. Maybe he'll love me one day, but even she didn't believe her own words anymore. That night, Sarah sat alone on the bed, looking at her wedding ring. She remembered the day he put it on her finger. No smile, no emotion, just silence. She whispered, "2 years, Armand. 2 years, and I still don't know who you are." Suddenly, she heard something outside her door. Slow footsteps, stopping for a moment, then leaving. Her heart beat faster. Was it him? She opened the door. No one. Only darkness. But she noticed something unusual. The hallway light near the locked room was still on. Someone had been there. Sarah walked a few steps toward it, but stopped. Her hands shook. Maybe it wasn't her place to know. Maybe the truth was something she wasn't ready for. She went back inside and sat near the window again. The moonlight touched her face, showing tears she didn't even realize had fallen. Far away, in his study, Armand sat with the same pain in his eyes, looking at an old photograph of another woman, someone from a life he couldn't let go of. Sarah's voice echoed softly in the background narration. "He never hurt me. But sometimes silence can break you more than words ever could." And as the night deepened, both hearts stayed awake, one longing for love, the other trapped by memories. The quiet war between love and the past had only just begun. The morning sun painted the mansion in gold, but nothing could warm the emptiness between them. Sarah had stopped asking questions. She moved quietly through the halls like a shadow, calm, polite, and invisible. But inside, her heart screamed for answers. One Sunday, Armand said he had business outside the city. As always, he left early, taking his black car. But this time, Sarah decided to follow. Something in her heart told her that today, she might finally learn the truth. She called the driver and said softly, "I need to go to the city temple. Follow the same route Mr. Armand took." The driver nodded, unaware of her real plan. For 2 hours, they drove through silent roads until the car stopped near a small hillside cemetery. Sarah's heartbeat quickened. she saw Armin's car parked near the gates. From a distance, she watched him walk slowly among the graves, holding a bouquet of white lilies. He stopped in front of one stone and knelt down. Sarah stepped closer, hiding behind a tree. The name on the grave hit her like thunder. Aisha Arman, forever in my heart. Her lips trembled. Aisha, who was she? Arman touched the grave gently, his voice low. I kept my promise, he whispered. I did everything you asked, but I still can't let go. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. She turned away, unable to breathe. That night, Arman came home late. His face was pale, his eyes empty. He didn't notice the look on Sarah's face, a mix of sadness and understanding. When he went to his study, she sat alone in the living room, staring at the clock. For the first time, she realized Armin was not heartless. He was broken. The next day, Sarah asked one of the older servants, who was Aish. The servant hesitated, then sighed. She was his fiancée, madam, the love of his life. They were to marry 3 years ago. Sarah's hands shook. What happened to her? The servant looked down. There was a car accident, sir. Was driving. She died 2 days before their wedding. The world around Sarah fell silent, so that was the secret. That was the reason behind his coldness, his distance, his pain. Later that evening, Tara walked toward the locked room upstairs. Her heart pounded. She tried the handle again, still locked. But this time, she noticed a small key hanging near the study door. Her hands trembled as she took it. Slowly, she walked to the locked room and turned the key. The door creaked open. The air inside smelled of roses and old memories. The walls were covered with pictures. Armin and Aisha smiling, laughing, dancing. On the table was a broken watch, a wedding dress in a glass box, and an old music box that still worked. Sarah pressed the button. The soft tune filled the room, gentle, sad, haunting. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She finally understood why Arman had never touched her. His heart still belonged to another. Suddenly she heard footsteps. Armin stood at the door, his face pale with shock. Sarah, what are you doing here? His voice cracked slightly. She turned, her eyes wet. I just wanted to know who you truly love. He looked away, unable to meet her gaze. I told you there are things you don't understand. I do now, she said softly. You married me because of her, didn't you? Silence filled the room. The only sound was the music box playing its final notes. Armin finally spoke, his voice heavy with guilt. Isha's father was my mentor. Before she died, she made me promise to never leave him alone. After her death, he wanted me to marry someone simple, kind, someone who could bring peace to my mother. We're that person, Sarah, but my heart was already buried. Sarah's tears fell quietly. So I'm just a promise you kept? Arman didn't answer, just closed his eyes, as if the truth itself was too painful. Sarah walked past him, whispering, maybe one day you'll forgive yourself, and maybe then you'll finally see me. As she left the room, the camera showed Armin standing alone, surrounded by memories of a love long gone. The music box stopped playing. The silence returned. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was filled with regret. Voiceover. She was not fighting another woman. She was fighting the ghost of a love that never died. Asterisk, the mansion felt colder after that night. The truth had escaped its locked room, and now it followed Sarah everywhere she went. Every step she took, every wall she looked at, she saw Isha's shadow. The wedding photos that were never hers, the memories that were never meant for her. Armin didn't speak about what happened. He didn't ask questions, didn't show anger. He simply went back to his silence. But this time, it was heavier. Maybe because now Sarah knew his secret. She moved like a ghost through the house. Her meals were smaller, her voice softer. Even the servants noticed. Madam looks weak. One whispered, she barely eats. But no one knew what was truly breaking inside her, not her body, but her heart. One afternoon, Sarah sat in the garden, holding a small rose in her hand. It was the same flower Arman used to leave on Ayasal's grave. She stared at it for a long time, then whispered to herself, you win, Ayasa. You still have him. That night she wrote a letter. Her hands shook as she held the pen. Each word was heavy with pain. Armand, I finally understand that I was never meant to be in your story. I was only written in as a promise. You've been kind, but your kindness is emptier than hate. I can't stay in a house where I'm just a shadow. I'm leaving tomorrow. You don't have to stop me. She placed the letter on his study desk and quietly walked to her room. Outside, rain began to fall again, as if the sky itself was weeping for her. When Armand came home later that night, he noticed the soft glow from the study lamp. He saw the folded paper waiting on the table, his name on it. He read every line in silence. His hands froze. The first time in years, his chest hurt. Not the kind of pain that came from guilt, but from fear. His fear of losing her. He looked up and saw her packed bag near the door. A sudden wave of panic hit him. He ran to her room, but she wasn't there. The rain outside grew stronger. He rushed to the window and saw her walking toward the gate with an umbrella in her hand. Without thinking, he ran after her. "Sarah," he called out, his voice echoing in the storm. She stopped but didn't turn around. Her tears mixed with the rain. "Please," he said, stepping closer. "Don't go like this." She faced him finally, her eyes red. "Why should I stay, Armand? You're not mine. You never were." He struggled for words. "I know I've hurt you." "No," she interrupted softly. "You never touched me, never shouted at me, never hit me. But your silence hurt more than anything." Her voice trembled. "Oh, you live with a memory, not a wife, and I can't compete with a ghost." The rain fell harder. Thunder cracked above them. Armand looked down, lost for words. "Sarah, I didn't mean to trap you in this." She smiled sadly. "You didn't trap me. I stayed because I hoped one day you'd see me. Not as her, not as a promise, but as someone real." She turned to leave again. But this time, Armand reached out and grabbed her hand. It was the first time he had ever touched her. Her heart stopped for a second. He looked into her eyes, rain dripping down his face. "I don't deserve you," he whispered, "but please, don't leave me alone again." Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks. "You already are alone, Armand. You've built walls around your heart, and even love can't climb them." She gently pulled her hand away and walked toward the gate. Armand stood frozen, the rain washing over him. He watched as the car door closed, and her shadow disappeared into the storm. Inside the mansion, the lights flickered, and the music box in Aisha's room began to play on its own, soft, haunting like a goodbye. Armand walked back inside, soaked and broken, holding her letter tightly in his hand. He sat in the dark, whispering, "She was never supposed to matter. But why does it feel like she was everything?" The camera zooms out as the rain continues to fall over the lonely mansion. Voiceover. Sometimes, the loudest goodbyes are spoken in silence. And sometimes love begins only after it's too late. Morning sunlight entered through the tall glass windows of the mansion. For the first time in 2 years, the house felt alive. No more silence, no more ghosts, only the quiet rhythm of new beginnings. Sarah stood in the kitchen, humming softly as she poured tea. The soft smell of roses filled the air. Armand walked in, still half asleep, holding his phone. When he saw her, a small smile appeared, real, gentle, unforced. "Good morning," he said. She turned, surprised. It was the first time he had said those words with warmth. "Good morning," she replied, her voice light. He sat at the table watching her move around. For 2 years, he had never really looked at her. Now, he couldn't look away. The days passed slowly, but peacefully. They started having breakfast together. Sometimes they talked about little things, the garden, the weather, the color of the sky. Other times, they sat in silence. But it was no longer cold. It was comfortable. One evening, Armand joined Sarah in the garden, where she used to sit alone. She was planting small white flowers. He picked one up and smiled faintly. "White lilies," he said. Aisha loved these. Sarah looked up, waiting for the pain in his eyes, but this time there was none. "Yes," he said softly. "But now they remind me of peace, not loss." Sarah smiled. "Then maybe it's time we plant something new." Together, they planted pink roses, her favorite. The mansion changed with them. The servants noticed. The air felt lighter. The rooms, once silent, now carried the sound of laughter and music. Armand opened the old locked room one last time. He took down Ayas's photographs carefully, placed them in a wooden box, and closed it gently. He whispered, "Thank you for teaching me what love was, but it's time to live again." When Sarah entered the room later, she saw what he had done. The space was empty, waiting for something new. That weekend, she redecorated it, not as a memory room, but as a dream room. Soft colors, sunlight, books, and a little crib near the window. Armand watched quietly, a strange warmth in his chest. "What are you doing with this room?" he asked. Sarah smiled, turning it into a nursery. He looked at her, confused. "A nursery?" She nodded, shyly placing his hand over her stomach. It took him a few seconds to understand, and when he did, he froze. Then, slowly, his face broke into a real smile, the kind of smile he hadn't worn in years. He whispered. Sarah nodded again. "Yes, we're going to be parents." That night, they sat on the balcony, the stars shining above them. Armand wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "I don't deserve this happiness," he said softly. Sarah leaned against him. "Maybe happiness isn't about deserving. Maybe it's about healing." He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, there was no shadow of the past in his eyes, only light. Months passed. The nursery filled with life, toys, soft colors, and laughter. Armand worked less, smiled more. Every evening, he read to Sarah from her favorite books. His hand resting on her stomach, feeling the tiny heartbeat that would soon join theirs. The mansion that once echoed with silence, now echoed with new life. On a quiet morning, the camera pans over the blooming garden. The same roses they planted together now covered the ground in pink and white. Sarah sat on the porch, rocking a small baby in her arms. Armand stood beside her, watching them with eyes full of peace. He whispered, "You were right, Sarah. Love doesn't start with passion. It starts with patience." She smiled, holding his hand. "And forgiveness," she added. "You had to forgive yourself before you could love me." The wind blew softly through the trees. Inside the house, the old music box played once more, the same one from Aisha's room, but this time didn't sound haunting. It sounded gentle, almost like a blessing. Armand looked up at the sky and murmured, "Thank you, Aya, for letting me go." Sarah looked at him, eyes full of tears, not of pain, but of gratitude. As the camera slowly zooms out, as the narrator's voice echoes one last time, love is not about forgetting the past. It's about choosing someone who helps you live again. 2 years of silence ended in one night. And one night gave birth to a lifetime of love. The screen fades to black. Soft piano music plays.